Success isn't just about talent, it's about the tiny choices you make consistently. What if I told you that just by mastering simple habits, you literally could transform your life? In this video, I want to share 5 discipline hacks that I applied to my life that changed it forever and can do same to you. Hi there, welcome back again to the best thing on the internet and the best thing since sliced bread. It's called the Mindscale with Olushola. I'm always so excited when I meet some of you physically and you tell me in person how much of a transformative experience these episodes are to you. I'm so grateful. We do this and try to churn out episodes twice a week, and I'm so happy that you guys are making it worth the while by liking, by subscribing, and by telling your friends about it, and by letting us know in the comments how much you've been blessed. Thank you so much. And just in case you're one of the very few people who are still yet to subscribe, I don't know what you're doing. Kindly ensure that you click on the subscribe button. Please do so. And also turn on post notifications so you'll be the very first person to know when next I drop a mind transforming video just like this one. Anyways, let's get to the juice. Listen, discipline isn't motivation. It's actually a system. And I want to show you how. More than ever, I believe strongly that we need to preach the gospel of discipline, particularly in our day. You know, there was a very damning statistic I saw from a material called The Power of Discipline by Daniel Walter, which was released in 2022. It says, and I quote, that only 10% of New Year resolutions end up succeeding. And the biggest culprit is always a lack of discipline. Let me explain exactly what he's trying to say. Is it just me? But how many of you notice what some people call initial gragra, okay? Where you begin the whole new year with so much enthusiasm, energy, determination, and, very strong willpower with the ambition to make the year the best thing ever for you. And it's almost as though you kick off the new year with so much enthusiasm throughout the whole of December 29th through to 31st. You're always excited, talking about how you're going to put different things in place for the new year, blah, 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 blah. Now, the new year begins from January 1st to 5th. You try to keep up with a new schedule, but the moment is the middle of the month. Every single enthusiasm and what we like to call ginger just happens to fizzle out. And here's the point. It is not as though your intentions were not pure and great. It is that it takes discipline to really keep up with your resolutions. And I know it is something that most people end up struggling with. In fact, let me put it this way. His statistic says only about 10% of New Year resolutions end up succeeding. I dare say that less than 5% of people end up keeping their New Year resolutions, and this is a fact. But this goes beyond just New Year resolutions. It actually cuts across the different angles and different facets of your life. And so in this video, I want to give you as quickly as possible some of my blueprints. I want to share the steps that have worked for me. And so I've called it the 5 hacks, the 5 discipline hacks that transform my life forever. Let's get right into it as fast as possible. Now, to number one discipline hack that changed it and did it for me was I learned to break my tasks into micro steps to achieve consistency. This is very important. Now, when I talk about breaking it into micro steps to achieve consistency, I am simply trying to say that sometimes it's not as though your attempts or your desires are not legitimate. It's that you're trying to climb an entire mountain with one step. It was Brian Chesky, the co-founder of Airbnb, Air, Bed and Breakfast. I like to always remember the full meaning of Airbnb. Brian Chesky, who said, don't focus on the mountain, focus on the first step, right? Many of you are just trying to bite so much more than you can chew. For example, you begin the new year where maybe perhaps in the previous year you didn't read an entire book in the whole year, and you say, this new year, I want to read 52 books, one a week. You definitely won't be able to accomplish it because you don't go from being totally indisciplined or undisciplined and expect immediately to move to being the most cultured and self-controlled human being in the world. It's going to take a process. It's going to take time. And so one of the first things I had to do was I learned to break those big tasks, no matter how great they are. I had to break them into micro steps to achieve consistency. You know, it was Bruce Lee who said something so profound. He says, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once. He says, I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And this is very important, because if you're learning a new skill, don't commit to saying stuff like, I'm going to do 2 hours a day. I'm going to commit to this thing 3 hours a day. Instead, start by committing 5 times daily, because the goal is not necessarily intensity. The goal is consistency. It's consistency, because many times sometimes you have 5 hours of intensity and you think you're going to get there, because the next 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 days, or sometimes a whole week, you don't end up doing it again. The goal must be consistency. And if consistency is my goal, I must first and foremost be honest enough with myself to know that if it's a skill that I have not honed hitherto, I'm not going to become a pro overnight. I'm not going to be an expert just by wishing it to be in. And so start by committing to very small minutes. Start by saying, maybe I'm going to read 15 minutes daily every day. I'm going to meet 20 minutes daily every day. And just by doing that, you find out that it becomes a lot more achievable. Because in many cases, the reason you're not doing it is not because it's not possible, but it's because your mind is playing tricks on you and letting you think, 1 hour, you definitely cannot do it. Something you've never done 5 minutes for before. And that's the truth. So why not start with 5 minutes, or perhaps sometimes 10 minutes, and begin to build your way up? So for example, instead of committing to reading one chapter of a book on an entire day, sometimes I would advise you to even be as elementary and as beginner as saying, I will start by reading one simple paragraph after breakfast. And that's how you start. Do that for 1 week. Before you know it, you begin to build the thirst and the desire to do more. This is important, because consistency matters more than the initial size of the action. This will help you. And so I hope that you employ this, because it worked for me, and I hope it does for you too. And it leads me to the second point, which is, there's a second discipline hack that has transformed my life, and it is that I learned to remove temptations, and I learned to design my environment for focus. This one is, in my opinion, a major game changer. It's a major game changer. Your environment is a major determining factor for if you end up keeping to your word. And so you need to learn to make focus easy by shaping your space. Can you control your space? This is important. And so, for example, we always make statements like, if you have an exam the next morning and you're trying to read to catch up to the exam and make sure that you finish up in time with your reading and all, it's best not to be around your bed. If not, you'll be deceiving yourself. And if I thought you're going to be on your bed, put your legs in cold water to ensure it keeps you awake. Anyways, all of these I'm just trying to say is to talk about the power of the environment. You need to ensure that you create and shape an environment, shape your space, design it in a way that it supports your goals. This is very important. You know, there was something very interesting I saw my wife do. She was trying to clock in good hours of sleep and also wake up early enough to do productive stuff, pray in the morning, get ready. Like for me, I don't need so much time to get ready. If I have maybe a 10 o'clock appointment, or maybe a 9 o'clock appointment, if I wake up for 6, right, I do my prayers for the first 1 hour. I from there immediately go and hit the gym, and then I'll come back maybe by 9 o'clock and then get ready for my event, and I'm good. Those are my very first things I try to do, and then maybe do some preps before the event. For my wife, if she has an 8 a.m. appointment, she has to be up from like 5 or 5:30, right? And then she's going to first and foremost maybe obviously do her devotion and everything. But then again, she has a tendency to walk around, do this one, try to set stuff, and then she's a breakfast person. So she tries to get her food, get her coffee out of the way, get this one, that one. I'm like, this thing takes a lot of time. Now, I'm giving you this whole story for a reason. I noticed something she tried doing recently, because she found out that she needed more time and more hours. And then she began to backtrack and find out the things that were eating into her time. And one of the things she realized is that her bedtime is actually 8 o'clock every evening. That's weird, by the way, because 8 o'clock, my night is just starting. But our bedtime is 8 p.m. every day. And she notices that when she's on the bed by 8 p.m., she's still pressing her phone. And that's quite weird. She can't meet up, because sometimes she presses her phone till like 9 o'clock and she's chopped about a full 1 hour, and she's supposed to be up by roughly 5 o'clock. Now, here's the point. And one of the things she started doing, she started moving her phone away from her bed space. And so she would plug the phone perhaps somewhere else in the house and then get into the house, okay? Get into the room, rather, get into the bed and then go off to sleep. And then she actually has a proper alarm clock that she bought specially that is not linked to her phone. Here's the point. It might seem extreme, but it's a very strong factor and a determining factor for if you will end up keeping up with your targets. And so, for example, if you're a remote worker, avoid working in your bed because you will very likely end up sleeping off. And then when they're asking on Slack, hello, are you there? You'd say, oh my God, that was my network that was bad, whereas you were lying. So this is very important. And so, for example, there was a data by, I think it was a Stanford University study that found out that remote workers who had a designated workspace were, for example, 47% more productive than others. This is important. Have a workspace for work. Have things you do at given points in time. Create an environment that supports what you're trying to do. And this leads me to hack number 3. This is a very important one. It is build the discipline of active learning. Build the discipline of active learning. I think personally that it is impossible to dissociate discipline from learning. I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by this point. Build the discipline of active learning. I noticed that a whole lot of people get into perhaps exercises that they would like to be productive, but sometimes the goal for them is to just clock in those hours and make their minds and their brains feel as though they were productive, but in many cases they were not. Let me explain what I mean, particularly as it relates to things like reading. If you read books, for example, it's not enough to just say, I've read 4 books or 5 books in an entire year, or I've read 10 books in an entire month. Those things might sound good, but the truth is, are you really reaping the dividends of that exercise, or are you just doing it to clock the hours? Let me explain. For example, if you read books, it's best to take notes while reading, because I've seen many people say they read 20 books a year, yet cannot remember anything because they did not engage actively. And so here's the question. It is more profitable for you to build discipline, right, through active learning also. It's not just enough to clock in the hours and do the stuff mindlessly or do it just because it's on your schedule. But it's important that you actually create a system that ensures that you engage actively. I'll give you a very beautiful example. Thank God I'm on one of my tables, right? So I have some books that I'm currently reading. I think they're currently just 2 books I'm reading at this time, but that's not even the thing. For the last book that I'd finished reading, there's like a full-blown notes here. And so every single time you see me reading, you're going to see me with perhaps a pen. Maybe if I'm using my iPad, no problem. My iPad has a pen. I'm always writing, always jotting stuff. If I'm not with my iPad, I'm going to be using a physical book. Now, this is important because one of the things you need to learn to do, particularly if you want to make the most of your life and make the most of your time, is to stop overrating your memory. Stop thinking that every single thing I read is going to stay stuck in my head, except if it's perhaps a prose or let's say some fictionary work, or you're reading some drama that excites you throughout. You don't have to write stuff. But if it's a self-help material for you to be able to remember things, or if you get a new word, even from a prose or drama work or anything or novel, try to write things down. This is important. And so writing these things down in many cases also helps stretch your thinking, and also it also helps in retention, and very importantly, it gives you something to go back to. Because look at it, there was these are excerpts and things I wrote from the last full book I read. Okay, as big as the book was, I was able to write out so many points and create so many pages. Guess what? If I forgot anything or try to remember stuff or try to remember the flow of thought of the writer, all I have to do is simply go back to the material that I wrote down. This is very important. And so the thing is, you can also build discipline by active learning. The more you let yourself know that I'm not just doing this task to clock in the hours, I'm doing it to improve myself, you have to put your mind there. You will engage actively. And if you're reading, for example, ensure you have a system for note taking. This is very, very important. It's not about the quantity of the books. It's about the quality of my mind when I'm done. I hope this helps. And this leads me to point number 4, which is you must learn to track progress and reward consistency. This one helped me so much, particularly if you're doing an exercise that rewards compounding and consistency. Let me give you an example. Maybe the gym. Okay. So very recently, I had to create a very rigorous gym schedule. Not rigorous per se. I had to keep a rule book and say, I'm going to hit the gym at least 4 times every single week. I've seen consistency in my work there. I've seen the way it's been growing. But one of the things that has actually helped me is that I've been tracking it. Because tracking actually helps. Habit tracking helps. I'll give you a very good example. There was a research by the British Journal of Health Psychology in 2020 that actually showed that habit tracking increases adherence by up to 42%, which means it's not just enough to say you want to kickstart a new habit. You have to track the habit. There was something I read somewhere that I think was so brilliant. I think it was from the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. He said something so profound. He talked about creating a chain in your habits where every single time you complete a task for the full day, okay, put an X on it, okay, and right after that, the next day, put an X under it and keep putting an X and X and X. And psychologically, you've already created a chain, right, that you can see and you do not want to break. And so you need to learn to track your progress. And so, for example, I hit the gym 4 times a week. And I noticed that every time I'm at the gym, I always have to clock in using my phone. And so I clock in with the Bluetooth thing. And so one day, I said, let me just go back to check and see how many times I've clocked. And it was so beautiful that I was clocking in all the hours. The only day I don't really go to gym is one day in the week. And apart from that day, I've seen that I was able to effectively, for the whole month, fulfill the desire to go to the gym by one day when I was ill. And so this is so important. You need to learn to track it because in most cases, right, habit tracking also sometimes gives you a desire not to break the flow, but also secondly, it just helps you keep up the habit. This is important. So for some of you, you need to use a wall calendar, okay, to mark the days you completed your habit. And even if that win seems small, okay, there's a dopamine reward that reinforces that behavior. Sometimes it's not because you cannot keep at it, it's because you don't track your progress. Because in some cases, when you don't feel like it is the progress report that just keeps you going. That is very important. For example, when you're going to the gym very well, you don't see the results immediately. You don't. But knowing fully well that I've clocked in the last 1 month dutifully and I've done it so obediently, it just kind of makes you feel like, okay, if I keep at it again for another 1 month to ensure I don't break this streak, I perhaps will begin to see results. And trust me, you absolutely will. And so you must learn this. You need to track progress and also reward consistency. So perhaps you can have stuff that you do to reward your consistency. It could be stuff like if I go a full 1 month without breaking my gym schedule, I'll have one proper cheat day on maybe one weekend, okay? Pick a Saturday where you go and eat all the rubbish you want to eat. And that's not bad, actually. Sometimes it's just some sense of reward, okay? Depending on how you want to go about it. But more importantly, learn to track progress and build consistency. And that leads me to the very final point, which is a hack that I think is so beautiful. You know, I even had to learn this recently, and I think it really helped. It is you need to learn to use anchoring. Use anchoring. That's point number 5. Use anchoring. Let me explain. You must attach new habits to old ones. Let me give you a very brief explanation to put things into context. And so anchoring means linking a new habit, okay, to something you already do daily. So your brain treats it as part of the same routine. I take that again. Anchoring means linking new habits, right, to something you already do on a daily basis, so your brain treats it as part of the same routine. So for example, if you want to start stretching, okay, try to do it right after brushing your teeth. Another example, if you want to write daily, do it right after you've brewed perhaps your morning coffee. Now, this is important because your brain builds what we call neural connections, okay? When actions are repeatedly paired. This is important. So your brain just creates a neural connection. So automatically, you know that whenever I'm done brushing, I'm always going to stretch, okay? And then this just helps you. You know that you've linked one thing to another. So for example, for me, I know the moment I'm done praying, I have to do Bible study. And the moment I'm wrapping up my Bible study, I have to go and pick up my gym clothes, okay? To be able to get my gym clothes, get my gym shoes, and hit the gym immediately. I've linked them together. And I know that at the time that I'm almost done with the gym, I have to start setting up my meeting plans and my to-do list fully 100% for the full day. And so just link it. It helps. It creates neural connections. And over time, that existing habit, for example, becomes a cue that triggers the new one. This is so profound. I learned this recently and I think it's been beautiful. So for example, there's a neuroscience research from the University College London, UCL, that found out that consistently pairing strengthens synaptic connections, okay? And it makes it easier for your brain to recall and perform the behavior automatically. And so this is important. Very, very, very important. You need to learn to anchor new habits to existing ones. In fact, I think it was BJ Fogg. He did a study on tiny habits, okay? And it showed that when you anchor new habits to existing ones, it actually triples your chances of sticking with them. So don't just bring in new habits and displace them. Anchor them with existing ones, and you will find out that you have increased your chances of being able to fulfill them. I have now come to the end of these 5 discipline hacks that have transformed my life, and I really do hope that you use same in your life and know how to apply it to your context, and I'm sure it will do exactly what it did to me, which is transform my life. Anyways, it's on this note that I want to say thank you so much for being a part of this. Do not forget to like, okay? Like this post. Also, if you haven't subscribed, you are wrong. Please, we give so much value, myself and my team. Guys, can you just say please subscribe? And not just that, comment and also share with a friend. Share, please subscribe, follow, do everything possible. If you're watching us from Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and everything, thank you so much. It's been amazing, and I look forward to seeing you at the very next episode of Mindscale. Do not forget once again to subscribe and also click on post notifications so you'll be the very first person to know when next we drop a life transforming and mind re-engineering video. See you at the next episode. Much love.